And for anybody who is listening to this podcast, if I was to say that when I talked about the transition around my sexual abuse and stuff, it was steps 4 through 9. It had nothing to do with just step 4, me looking at it again. I'd looked at it many times through therapy and all that. I'm looking at it again. When I put in the last column all the things that I had done in my life relative to that and to, just the things that I had done to people, I began to lose my victimization. I began to lose my perspective that somehow this world has been damaging to me. I started to see that I had been damaging to it.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. From Studio A, deep in the heart of Texas, that was the voice of our friend Mr. Marty C. that you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you will be hearing so much more goodness from him in just a moment. He has some pearls of wisdom to share with all of us. But first things first, on this here episode number 227, Dos Siete. This episode is brought to you by Tammy and Jane. Do you know what Tammy and Jane did? Well, they went to our website, soberspeak.com, and they clicked on the little yellow donate tab, and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Tammy and Jane. This episode is coming right out to youans. I, John M., just another bozo on the bus, will indeed be the chairperson for this meeting between meetings, and I am truly honored and privileged. You can't see me right now, but I'm kind of bowing, like you would bow before somebody, to serve all of you listening in. So take a seat, if you will, around this virtual table, and let's get started. I have many of you throughout the years who have written in or come up to me when you see me and say, John M., where should I start listening to episodes now that you have whatever it is, to whenever the time was? At this point, it would be 227 episodes, right? Well, it's hard for me to tell you where to start because all of the episodes are like children to me. They're all fantastic. But I can tell you that we just recently published on the website the top, okay, when I say top episodes, I mean most listened to episodes of 2021. And we also have the episodes from 2020 and 2019 on there. And those were either voted on by listeners or they were the most listened to. And so anyway, you can go to our a website, and along the, what is it we got? Along the top, it says, top episodes. The lovely Mrs. M actually put all that out there for us all to consume. So if you go to soberspeak.com, click on the top episodes tab at the top of the page, you will be able to listen to that. All right. Now, on to a little Mr. Marty C. We have had Marty C on in the past, and he is back again. And we're going to have him again in the future, folks. And this episode is called These Are the Steps We Took. As you can tell from that opening little clip that was played, we get into some heavy stuff. But this is, just keep in mind, Marty is from Hamilton. Oh my goodness. Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And he got sober on July 16th of 1987. This is truly a wide-ranging conversation. Like I said, that clip was just the beginning of it. We talk about two-stepping, Marty's 14-year experience in Alcoholics Anonymous when he met Mark, when Mark Houston told him, Marty, you are asleep dreaming that you are alive. And that got Marty's attention. We're talking about Marty's 10th-step experience, a tragic situation involving Marty's middle daughter. Marty's mantra is, it's gonna be okay. I almost entitled this episode, It's Gonna Be Okay, but we went with, these are the steps we took. We talked about love and tolerance, and so much more. You truly have to listen to this one all the way through, because at points it's funny. Sometimes it's very emotional and to the point, where you can hear a pin drop. And we discuss some of the imperfections of Alcoholics Anonymous and the people in it. We're all over the map. I know you're going to enjoy this one. So ladies and gents, take a seat or, relax and enjoy this in whatever position you happen to be in. If you're standing up and you want to enjoy it, I'm good with that. If you're sitting and want to enjoy it, I'm good with that. If you're laying down and want to enjoy it, I'm good with all the postures. Do whatever you need to do. And we will have plenty we will have plenty of listener feedback at the end of this here ep. Enjoy Marty C. Okay, everybody, so we are back once again with the great Mr. Marty C. from the great white north of Canada. So, Marty, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, give your sobriety date if you wish, and then we'll tee it up and get started here.
Well, yeah, the most important thing is I'm an alcoholic. My name is Marty Cosgrove. I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My home group is called the Prince George Group. I was telling John yesterday I want to make sure I put a plug in for my group and my group members. Just an amazing place to be. And you're all welcome anytime you're in the area. That's where I'm at and what I'm doing.
Gosh, I would love to get up there. I love Canada. It's just... I just love going up there. I don't know why. Whenever I would come up there, in fact, I would go to meetings in that area. I was in the Toronto area, all sorts of different meetings, and I would come in the meetings and they would all look up and yell at me. They go, "There's Texas right there," all that kind of stuff.
Did you get to the World Conference? We were at the World Conference in Toronto?
No, I wasn't at that one.
It was 05, I think. We have we got a great roundup called the Ontario Regional Conference. That's a great roundup. If you ever were coming up for a function, for an activity, that's the one to come up for.
What month is that in? What month of the?
It's usually April. It's usually in April, May.
Okay.
Like it's in the early spring.
Okay. Is that one of the most well-attended conferences in the area or in Canada?
With one of the better itineraries, it's just it's probably our premier event in Ontario. Yeah.
Okay. Super. Well, for those of you listening in also, I hope they're able to come in and I'm sure you'll be there. Okay. You can go see Marty C. Just let them know you're coming beforehand. You could always email. I didn't say this on the last episode, but you can always email me at John at soberspeak.com and I'll get you over to Marty. I pass all of these comments on and I'd love to hear any comments that you have regarding the speakers. So yesterday, we covered a lot of area. And as you know, we kind of ran out of time and I had to schedule some more time, get you back on the calendar today. And I'm so glad you're here. But we were able to talk about, a lot of things, but I want to talk about two things right there at the end. Oh, and before I go into that, we were talking a little offline here. and I was saying, no, dude, like, hold on, I want to get that on the actual the episode. And you were saying there was a saying that you had heard from things you were doing years ago. It's called "Don't leave it in the green room." And actually, with this particular technology we use, they have something called the virtual green room right before we started. So,
Yeah.
what were you? What did you mean by that?
Yeah. Like the green room is the waiting room before you go on air and in any of these sort of broadcast opportunities. And I did a live call in at the show on addictions on Sunday nights for many years. And we would have the guests come in and we'd be sitting in the room was actually green and it's the waiting room. And we would sit in the green room before we're going on air. You say hi to somebody. And of course, we're all open books, right? We don't really hold any secrets. We're not talking when we get together, we don't talk about the weather. You know what I mean? So some good stuff starts flying out of our mouths and we catch ourselves. Oh my God, this is the show. We can't leave it in the green room. We got to put it out there and get it on air. So that was a live call-in television show. It was a lot of fun, very rewarding thing. Very much like this, like when you said a prayer to bring us in, John, and asking that this message be, set before anybody out there that needs to hear it. That's how I see these opportunities. It's a very powerful, anonymous endeavor. It's like you and I are going to get together and talk about some things, and somebody might actually bend their ear towards it and catch something that inspires them or changes their life. That absolutely excites me beyond all belief.
Yeah. I can't tell you, Marty. I don't know how much you listen to the podcast or not, but I always put there's a big portion of what we have here is called listener feedback. Right on the end of it, I just read through all the various Facebook comments and emails and Instagram messages and all that I get, and it just blows my mind, really. That and I know that there's only. Like me, I listen to various podcasts, but I rarely take the time to go ahead and actually write in,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's just a portion of the people that are hearing this out there. And hopefully we're doing some good in the world.
Yeah.
All right. So, like I said, the last time we ended up on a couple of notes. Number one, you had a jail cell moment. I really enjoyed you talking about that, where you heard that voice saying that you don't have to live that way anymore. And then we got up to the point to where you had been in Alcoholics Anonymous. And by the way, if you didn't hear the first part of Marty, go back and listen. It doesn't mean you have to stop listening now, but definitely go back and listen to the first one. But nonetheless, and then we got to that point in sobriety where you had been doing the deal, and you had been basically kind of two-stepping, I think is what we talked about last time. And then you got to that point in your sobriety where you were 14 years sober and something occurred. So why don't you take us from that point on?
Yeah. And the funny thing about like a change of that sort of magnitude is very seldom do you ever realize that it's necessary, or that it's not just that it's coming, but that it's even necessary. If somebody had told me before all of these stars lined up that there was something wrong with my Alcoholics Anonymous program, I would have. In fact, I'll tell you the story, the way it unfolded, and you can see the sort of arrogance and the self that was so predominant in my sobriety. I took all the credit for my sobriety for all of those 14 years. I had this relationship with God, but it was a pinch hitter God. It was something that was, these were decisions and choices I was making in my life, and some were good and some were bad.
And so I'm assuming when you say you're taking all the credit for it, it's probably not like you were outright saying, this is me, to hell with God. It was probably more of a subconscious sort of thing. Am I right? Can you explain that a little?
Well, the pride my pride would be filled. Like I was just talking about doing the television show. I was an active member of my community in the addictions realm. I was, everybody gave me praise. My mother constantly talked about my sobriety, and so these sort of levels of self would be attended to in some degree, and my identity became became very much centered around that. And it wasn't like there wasn't an arrogance or an egoism around it. It was more about I left God out, and Sandy always talks about that. It's like so easy. It's not about, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. And it isn't on the conscious level. It's on the subconscious level. I'm rolling through things. And when things go bad, he gets all the blame. And when things go well, I get all the credit. Mm-hmm. And it's just a mutual understanding, and away we go. And when I talk about being in AA, I'm at a conscious level in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous with service positions, home groups, sponsors, sponsees, many meetings a week because I love it. I'm running, doing these conferences or roundups. I'm speaking a lot, and because I have this sort of spiritual edge, I'm speaking a lot on Sunday mornings. My life is full, and AA represents a big, big part of it. So what I didn't recognize was I was lacking the real driving force. And when two-stepping is what two-stepping looks like, it really looks like not drinking, and it really looks like being a good dude, being a good man. And not for any other reason, but what tells us in our third step that no matter what our motives, we can be kind, virtuous, these kinds of things. Our life is still can be based on self. We can still be very self-driven. It's not just mean, egotistical, and arrogance. It can sometimes hide itself behind the kindnesses and those kinds of things. But self was definitely running the show. And the way I knew that was every few years I would have these major calamities and spiritual breakdowns where I would be so angry and so self-loathing. And these periods would last for anywhere in between a day to, a couple of weeks, never longer than that. And again, when I would come out of it, I would take all the credit. When I would go into it, I'd give him all the blame. And this was just an ongoing thing that I thought everybody who was sober went through. I just thought they did. So here's what happened, John, is I was asked to be the closing speaker at a roundup, and the main banquet speaker and I were outside smoking cigarettes, talking about fitness and healthcare. And this, unfortunately, this dude was smoking about 5 cigarettes at once. Like I smoked 3 packs a day. He was smoking. We were having a good old chin wag about life. And he was an amazing, exhilarating man to be around. I could feel his incredible energy, and I felt the need to tell him what a great AA member I was. And I went on and on and on, sharing with him all that I knew of AA and all that I knew of, my role in AA and my experiences in AA. And right in the middle of about a 20-minute diatribe, he looks at me and he says, "Son, you're asleep dreaming you're awake."
Say that again. He says, "Son, you're asleep."
"Son, you're asleep dreaming you're awake."
Ah.
And I said, "Pardon?" And I was offended. I said, "Well, what?" He said, "I can tell there's an experience in Alcoholics Anonymous you haven't even had." And I said, "Buddy, I don't know if you mustn't have been listening. I just told you there isn't anything about AA I don't know. I am the king of AA in all of Canada, and I have no idea why you would come at me like that." He said, "I'm coming at you like that because I can tell there's an experience that you haven't had." And I said, "Oh yeah, and what's that, wise guy?" And he said, "It's the steps." I said, "What about the steps?" He said, "Have you ever taken the steps?" Well, of course I have. I'm 14 years sober. I mean, of course I have. He said, "I didn't ask if you knew what they were, if you've studied them, if you read them, I didn't ask." I said, "Have you ever taken them? Here are the steps we took. Have you ever taken the steps?" I had to concur that whatever he was alluding to was starting to make sense. Like, no, I don't know. And he said, "I could help you with that if you've got a few minutes. Come on with me." I followed him up to his hotel room, walked up the stairs sheepishly, I might add. I have to say there was a lot of apprehension and trepidation. I hadn't heard the guy speak yet. He was speaking that night. I walked in behind him. He closed the door and he said to me, he said, "Why are you an alcoholic? What makes you an alcoholic?" And I told him what I thought made me an alcoholic. And for the first time in 14 years I've been in AA, a man qualified me as an alcoholic. No one had ever asked me that question before. You guys let me come to your tables. You let me say it over and over and over again, but you never ever took any time to describe to me or explain to me what an alcoholic was. And I didn't have a big book experience. I told you that yesterday. That was not so I had this idea. I sat around the same table as you didn't because you said you're alcoholic. I said I was an alcoholic. I had no idea what it meant. And this guy said, "Can you stop when you start?" And I said, "No." He said, "Can you stop starting?" And I said, "Absolutely not." He said, "That's what an alcoholic is. That's it. And so we started to have a conversation around step one. And I said, holy crap, no one had ever had this conversation with me before about powerlessness. He says, it's the only issue in Alcoholics Anonymous, Marty, powerlessness. You either are or you aren't. And he says, and if you are, then you need power. If a lack of power is your problem, then you must access that power. You've not taken the steps. You've never done that. And I thought, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about John, because he was right. He was right. And as he walked a little bit more into the room, I followed him into the room. And we're talking about minutes here, not hours, days, weeks, months. We're talking about a transition of moments. And as I followed him in, he said, you were talking a little bit about God outside. I have no doubt, he said, that you believe that there is a God, but do you believe that God knows you? Do you have that experience? And I said, no. He said, well, because when it says that, do you now believe or you're willing to believe? He says, I understand in the second step, you're good with that, but God is everything or else he is nothing. That's not the way you live. You live a life based on self, according to what you were telling me outside. And again, I had to concur. I had never seen that stuff in the big book. And he said, God is everything or else he's nothing. What's your choice? And I said, everything. I didn't realize until we were done that. Well, I'll keep going. And he said, when we talk about making a decision, Marty, this is about sitting there and you have this powerlessness, this need for power, and then you need to make a decision to access that power. And he said, we use this little prayer to access this power. This is what we do. He said, would you say that prayer with me? And I said, I will. And then when we got down, he said, would you get down on your knees? And I said, I will. And he moved the coffee table apart, and us two big guys, because he's a big James Coburn looking dude, big, handsome, barrel-chested guy with silver beard, silver hair. And we draped our arms over each other, and he started saying a third step prayer, a prayer I had never heard before, 14 years sober. And in the prayer, for the first time in praying, I actually heard the words of the prayer in their literal meaning. And I began to feel the shift inside my chest. If I could try to explain it, I could never do it justice. And I knew that something of incredible magnitude was beginning to take place. And when we stood up, I really believed, when I stood up about 8 or 10 minutes with this man, I believed that I was a different man. And so what we did was we sat down and we talked, and he talked about all the things that were blocking me, driven by self. And he asked me about my life. And there was nefarious, there was dishonesty, there were affairs, there was, and then some of them were overt, some of them were more clandestine. There was all kinds of manipulations around finances and these kinds of things, and dishonesty in my marriage, and parenting. Like, I was angry at times, and I would never allow myself to be honest about that with other AA members. There was a lot of stuff in my life that, because I'm 14 years sober, I'm not supposed to lose it. Those kinds of things. These things started to break open. And he talked about a 4-step inventory, which I had never done in my 14 years of Alcoholics Anonymous. Out of the big book: resentment, fear, sex conduct. We're going to look at these things. So he helped me set up my 4-step inventory. And when me and Mark Houston parted ways, I have never been the same since. He spoke that evening. I hugged him as he left. And after that time, I checked in with him on my 4-step inventory about a week later. And our relationship was never connected live again, but through messages and emails and these kinds of things, we had contact. And I just kept him abreast of the progress. Within a couple of years, he came up to do a conference up here in Canada, the CA conference. And I was able to just to say hello to him and spend some time with him there. But other than that powerful moment, that moment to me is the same as it's exactly the same as the moment for Bill. When Bill met Bob, it was no different. And so because something major and powerful has shifted inside of me, because this man had an answer. So I was having a Dr. Bob experience. This man had an answer. And that's what happened. I got driven into the 12 steps. Now, having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, I tried to carry this message to alcoholics. You should have seen my sponsees' faces. I had a stable of sponsees for 25, 30 guys that have never taken the steps. All of us running around, hitting on women, dances and campouts and all kinds of activities and all kinds of service positions and, bad relationships and financial blow-ups, playing sports together and all that kind of stuff, doing AA. Not one step among us. So that's what happened. That's what happened. That was the transformation period in my life. And then Charlie talks about the same thing at 16 years sober, and I was 14 years sober when it happened to me. It was just this transformation.
We will be continuing our conversation with Marty C. in just a moment. Just a reminder, you're listening to Sober Speak. You can find us on the World Wide Web at www.soberspeak.com. There you can find the donate button on our website, and you can use if and only if the spirit moves you. Please keep in mind this is a podcast funded by you, the listener. Okay, so you have this conversation with Mark Houston.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you're a changed man. But by the way, when you went back to your sponsees and such and started talking to them about actually doing things differently, I mean, what was that experience like?
Well, you can imagine with the number of sponsees that I had, how many of the guys were actually not really doing AA, and even in a moderate, nice sense. Like, and I don't know how to explain it, but I went to a lot of guys who were really dogging it, and said to them, "Look, I'm not your sponsor. I'm going in this direction. You can come with me if you want, but if you're not really into this AA thing, it's." You need to find a sponsor that's gonna sort of be okay with that. But I got to go this way, and it's just gonna be the way it is.
And when you explain that to them, go this way. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they had questions. What were you telling them was going to be this way? What was going to be different?
It was the 12 steps. It says, like, if you're not going to take the steps, I got nothing here for you. I've been sitting here trying to problem solve for you for years. You know my story. So I'm an ex-con. I've been lousy in relationships. The only time I ever spent any time in any banks or anything was to make withdrawals of money that didn't belong to me. And the whole thing about it was like, so I've got these, I've got this history. People and my sponsees are asking me financial questions, and I'm giving them. I'm 25 years old. I'm giving grown men marital advice and advice about their children in university. I've never had a family of my own at all, and that's because that's what everyone else was doing. They would come to me and they would have a problem, and I would solve that problem. Some of the most ludicrous responses too, because I was making shit up as I went, and I thought we all were doing the same thing, and I thought that was my job. I thought as a sponsor, it was my job to have every answer that a guy asked. Oh my God, can you imagine, John? And I had an answering machine, one of those old tape answering machines, with the tapes on them, and every day I would come home and it would be filled. It would be filled. And so one by one, I would call the guys back and I'd say, you need to leave her. And then a click. And then the next one would be like, you need to go to a hospital and get that looked at. And then the next one would be like, and you can hear in there is no mention of any spirit, God, connection, no steps, nothing. No go help another alcoholic, nothing. And because I was so driven by self, I didn't even recognize selfishness and self-centeredness in the other individuals I was trying to help. Now, I think that underneath that, when I talk about two-stepping, step one, or I got a big alcohol problem. Step 12, help people. I did help a lot of people. I make a joke if you hear my talks lately. It was because I was 240 pounds of, let's say, energetic rage when I first got sober. And so I was a good guy if you needed to move things. So my sponsor and I, the first 5 years, that's what we did every weekend. We were moving people. And I thought that was AA help. I thought that's what they meant. And they say, what are you doing this weekend, Marty? I don't know, but I'm probably moving somebody. And we were moving somebody every weekend. And I thought I was doing the AA. I swear to God, I know it sounds ridiculous, but when I look back in hindsight, it's like staying sober was like following the direction, and then being obedient to something. Dr. Bob says you got to be obedient to spiritual principles, but being obedient to something is probably what kept me from not drinking. But it didn't bring any sort of sanity or peace of mind or reconciliation or a cleanup or an amends to my life. It didn't bring any of that. So the entire thing in between steps 2 and 11 was missing. So when I told these guys, this is what we're going to do, some of them were all over it. And a few of them sustained it. I got one guy, I'm 34 years sober. I got one by a guy I've been sponsored for 30 years, 31 years. I had a guy at my house yesterday who I sponsored 33, 34 years ago. He went in another direction. He's never taken the steps or anything, but he's still in my life. He's still a good friend. A lot of the guys just disappeared, John. It was very interesting how I was the link to their connection to AA. AA became very, very much less important when I headed in this direction. And I got to tell you, like that, you're the first person that's ever asked me that question about how it affected the men that I was quote unquote sponsoring. I'll tell you how it affected my reputation in Alcoholics Anonymous. It was awful. It was awful because if I was to, in any way, shape, or form, accept what Mark Houston was saying to me to be true, then that meant that every stick of information and support and Alcoholics Anonymous that I'd been given to that date was errant. That's what it meant. And I don't mean 100%, 100%. I'm just saying there was a major piece that was missed. And if it was missed by the message carriers to me, how far and how deep was it? Well, when I came back, in fact, that Sunday, my sponsor, who was sitting out in the audience that Sunday, my first sponsor, I'm just so natural, right? I had that experience on the Saturday, and my wife was with me, and she'll attest to this. Like, something very powerful moved inside of me, and I was reduced to tears about two things: about what had I missed all these years, and then of course now the joy of the opportunity to grow more, because I thought I had arrived. I already thought I had hit everything in AA there was to hit. Now, like I said to you yesterday, oh my God, like there's every day there's more, and so when I got up to speak the next day on that Sunday, my sponsor was sitting out there, and I said, I've never taken the steps. Here I am. I'm your Sunday morning speaker, and I've never had a 12-step experience. I've never taken the steps, and I didn't take the steps, and my sponsor didn't take me through the steps. How could he take me through the steps? He'd never taken the steps either. And I thought, and I pointed to him. See what I'm saying? Like, I'm up at the front of a room with 600-700 people, and I shovel it off like that, thinking we all know this. I'm just going to say something that we are all going to become aware of. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. Well, people don't want to hear that, and he was very upset with me and has not talked to me since.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, there was a bit of a campaign that took place to besmirch and harm my reputation.
And so, did you all get to talk? Did he say why he was upset?
No, not he hasn't, but there's a lot of other people, and it's a very tenuous thing because it just separated the town, it separated the city. And like I said, I'm active, I'm involved, and now I'm going to come at it from a 12-step perspective. Everything I come at is going to be about the new guy, working with others, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a 12-step perspective. I always tell people I'm not a big book thumper. Like I got into the book. It became a very important part of my life. I became friends with Charlie Parker, Myers, Chris, and a lot of the guys, these are my friends now, right? Chris Schroeder is one of my best friends. So I become very involved in a group of folks that speak this same language, and this is the message we carry. Well, there's a separation that took place here. So I started having all these one-day roundups, and I called them a day in the steps. And I had all these roundups here where people could come and be invested in their own journey and their own discovery rather than me sitting up at the podium. I never get asked to speak in my area at all. I speak all the time abroad, but I never get asked to speak. They always say that you're vilified in your hometown, right?
Well, maybe somebody will hear this and think otherwise. Have you ever talked about this, like, kind of publicly before from the podium?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, some people suggested that I stopped a few years ago. It was with a lot less love and tolerance. It was like there was not an aggression. I don't want to say an aggression, but I was hurt, right? I got hurt by the fact that all I was trying to do was explain my experience and say, if the 12th step says having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, my jailhouse experience on July the 16th, 1987, albeit dramatic and transforming, is not the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was trying to carry that message for many years, that you had to have a powerful spiritual awakening like that. So, but no idea about how to get there. Hope it happens for you. This is what I was describing yesterday. hope it happens for you, that you get desperate and in pain enough that you have to scream out for help. Well, little did I know there was actually a 12-step process, which sponsorship is basically charged with the duty of carrying that message to you. And that isn't me pointing my finger at the sponsors. It's like, it's groupthink. The whole, when they say there are pockets of enthusiasm of Alcoholics Anonymous, you've heard that saying before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pockets of enthusiasm. Well, that must mean that if there's pockets of enthusiasm, that must mean there's pants of non-enthusiasm. And what I would like to say is middle of the road AA, which is untreated, non-spiritual, non-12-step Alcoholics Anonymous, where you go to meetings, you discuss the troubles of the day, and you share with those. And people are, when in Rome, if you think that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is, that's what it is. And you will have the same experience with me. I was talking with Chris. We were doing a workshop together one day, and I said, how could so many people be fooled? How could so many people be deluded? And he said it's his theory, and I happen to agree with him. I won't be able to repeat it as well as he stated it, is that when 12 and 12 meetings busted open in your mid-70s into the 80s, thousands and tens of thousands of meetings across the United States and Canada opened up based on the 12 and 12. And so people would get sober, and they'd be sober for a few months and stuff like that, and they would start reading this book at tables, and they would begin to identify with having had the experiences in this 12 and 12. So I've never gone and made direct amends, but I'll read the ninth step and think, well, my parents and family are talking to me now, so I must have made amends. And so I begin to acclimatize my sobriety and having taken the steps with what I'm sitting and listening to you talk about. Because if I'm identifying with experiences you're having and you've taken a ninth step, well, then I must have taken a ninth step too, just like being an alcoholic. And I loved meetings, so I was around meetings all the time. And this is what Chris's theory is, that so people believe that they've taken the steps. And in fact, there is a specific directive way to engage in the process of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a program. It's an actual program, like any other treatment program for addiction, that has a beginning, a middle, and an end process to it. And when you go to a treatment center or something like that, they have a program, and you follow the program. It doesn't matter if it's making your bed in the morning, brushing your teeth, going for breakfast, sitting in a group. You follow the program. In AA, there's nothing like that. You shake hands, you get a coffee, you sit down, you can listen, you can talk, you can do anything you want in an AA meeting. If you've been to enough meetings, you've actually seen that.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place to be. So that's, that's how it all happens. So this transformation, albeit remarkable and incredibly wonderful, and it wasn't easy to be around. And my wife, who's also in Alcoholics Anonymous for 30 years, she's again, she was often taken aback by it because she was married to that guy.
Really? Yeah. Okay, so you're an open book, so I'm just going to ask you a few questions. By the way, I feel, as you're describing this, I just feel so fortunate. My sponsor, his name is Bob. I got him in 1989. Still have him today. I call him my temporary sponsor. I'm going to give it a shot. And he, I was similar. I had been in and out of AA for 3 years. And he took me and he says, well, hey, have you ever worked the steps? And I was like, I could have had a VA, right? I was like, oh, now it makes sense. And he took me through the steps, and we did it by the big book. We did we did all the steps by the big book. And I just feel so fortunate that I ran into him right off the bat, and I know a lot of people don't have that sort of experience. But let me ask you a couple questions. So you seem like a very reasonable, rational, I'm sure you are a reasonable, rational, fun kind of guy, right? And so now I'm kind of wondering about, and this is a little bit different. This is something I would not ask you about during an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, but I'd ask you off to the side. I'm going to ask you on this podcast. If you talk to somebody who has some sort of angst or some sort of, won't ask you to speak or whatever, what's their side of the story? I mean, what are they thinking over there? Can you help me understand that?
Well, it's not all on them, and some of it's on me. As I say, the way I came out of the gate, people used to say to me that I split rooms. There are people that carry this same message that I have, like Charlie and Kate and people like that they don't necessarily split the room. I used to say from the front of the room, and there's a couple legendary things about me doing roundhouse kicks and knocking down slogan trees and throwing fourth edition big books across the room and modem to modem. That's never going to happen. I wouldn't even open up a fourth edition. And so I had this experience, but then I also had this narrow-minded, closed-minded. So it wasn't really a good match.
Got you. It was kind of my way or the highway. Yeah. You're all idiots if you don't do it my way type
so
thing,
a lot
right?
of people, like Chris, Chris Raymer. You speak with Chris today, and he's an absolute affable and lovable human being, dreadfully shy, but an incredibly nice man. And when he had this transformative experience in 7 years, he was going to, his story, and he, and that's what happened. And he came out guns a-blazing, and some people, and I see it as passion, and some people were seeing it as anger, and so I would split the room, and people would say, "Come on," and because I would say there are only two kinds of people in AA: those that take the steps and those that don't. And the ones that don't think the ones that do are in a clique. And we are. I would say that. And we are in a clique. And the fact is that I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment anymore, but those are room splitting. Those are because somebody sitting there does now. I just want to talk about this really quickly, John. I'll give you a quick example. So we have a group, a guy. He's one of the most revered old timers in my group. I absolutely love him. And he calls me up one day. He says, "Hey, Marty," he says, "I got this guy. You remember the guy who used to be our secretary, Dan? He's hammered, man. Can I bring him?" Because I got 2 meetings a week, and this one meeting we got in the basement. It's called the back room meeting, and we really take it to point down there. He says, so this old guy says, "Can I bring him to your meeting?" I said, "My meeting?" I said, "It's your meeting too, man. Of course." Bring him. He said, "Yeah, but he's drunk." I said, "All the better, right?" So he brings him in, and this old guy in my group, who again I say is revered, he comes in, and everybody's so glad to see him there. He never comes on a Thursday night. So he comes in and he sits down, and I'm talking, and I do my thing, and all of a sudden there's chalk flying around all over the place and spit. I'm getting all excited, right? And I look down, and the drunk guy's half asleep, but I look at the old guy, and his jaw is on the table like that. And I'm like, we get it all done. We wrap it all up. We start putting the chairs and everything away. And he's 36 years sober. And I'm walking up the stairs, and he tugs on my shirt, John. Like I'm in front of him, and just him and I left in the whole meeting. He tugs on my shirt, and I turn around. I said, "Yeah, buddy, what's up?" He said, I think I'm one of those guys you were talking about there." And I said, "What do you mean, man?" He said, "I don't think I've ever taken the steps." And I just started to laugh, and I said, "I love you, buddy. If I was to scour the world, the earth for a father, I'd pick you. I don't know whether you need to take the steps or not, but I knew that." And he said, "How did you know?" "It's because you don't sponsor anybody." He said, "Wow, nobody's asked me." I said, "That's not the point." I said, "If you took the steps, the 12th step says that you'd be doing that. That's what it says. That's how I can tell whether people take the steps or not. They're carrying the message." And then I said, "I love you, man." And this is a guy who, and he finds out anybody's struggling, he dips into his pocket. If he's just a beautiful, beautiful old dude. So there are many occasions like that. And I take guys through the steps in my basement. I got guys for 25 and 30 years stepping up to the plate and saying, "You know what, Marty, I heard you speak there a couple of weeks ago, and there's no way I had the same experience that you guys are having. So let's see what's going on here." And when they sit in the room by step 3, they're going, "Where's this shit coming from? Where's this stuff coming from?" And it's the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and message carriers, like Sandy Beach and Mark and people like that. I just get these guys together, and all of a sudden, guys who've been sober for a long time, who were just living these sort of lives, no great hurt highs and no terrible lows, just as humming across, and they go, "Oh my God." And they have new experiences, and there are some of us who talk like this that know that part of our charge is the guys with 12 and 14 and 16 years sober. The guys who have been here for a long time, who have never ever taken the steps, who've never sponsored anybody, and they wonder why their life is just, why they aren't feeling it like you're feeling it. Like, some people look at me and think I'm crazy, and I look back at them and think, "Man, you're crazy for not taking the steps. If you took the steps, you'd be nutty like me." That's the outcome.
There was a guy, Marty, that when I first got sober in our group, who was a wonderful, wonderful man. Just absolutely loved him. Um, and he was a traditions expert. He kept the group kind of on the straight and narrow, and made sure that we were considering all these things that he did in a really nice way. And I liked him. And there was we were coming up with some step speakers, and I was in charge of getting the step speakers. And I went up to him. He's passed now, but I don't want to say his name. But
Nope.
I went up to him and I said, "Hey there, would you be willing to speak on the 4-step next week?" And he said, "Well, John," and he was like 25 years sober, I think, 20, 25. He said, "John, I've never done a 4-step." And I remember it just kind of blowing me away. And there's another guy in my group, David G, who says, he's been on this podcast many times. He says, you know what insanity is being part of a 12-step program and never doing the 12 steps. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't. But it's the power of the norm is so strong. Like, it's the group think, and people, again, like when I started getting more, I didn't get less. I was passionate all the time, but I stopped being. I stopped being offensive, and the thing about it was I was never ever pointing at anybody. I wasn't pointing at anybody, but I would have people come up to me. And here's the thing that happens. Don't forget, I'm 34 years sober. I'll still have people come up to me today, and they'll say, "Oh, come on, Marty, you don't remember me back in 1987, 88, 89, talking about the steps?" No. No. And I'll say to them, so what? You had a 12-step experience. Someone took you through the steps? Oh yeah, I went up north there for 6 years. Remember, I was up north, and this woman took me through the steps. And I say, and you came back to Hamilton, just kept it secret? Like, I don't, like, I don't understand. Like, and I'll say to them, please don't say that. Please don't say that, because I have this discernment inside of me of what it looks like to have a 12-step experience. If like that first sponsor I told you about, I'll know when he takes the steps when I hear this, when I hear the knock at my door. Now, I've gone 4 times at the direction of my current sponsor to sit and make amends with that man, because he saved my life, and I owe him my life. He saved my life, and he resists any dialogue or conversation about that stuff. So that's okay. So I back off and I leave it alone. This guy went on to high-level service positions. He's really well known in the world, in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it is what it is. But I know that when he takes the steps, that's what'll happen. Now, I don't even know how to describe it anymore. Like, there's no and so the guys, here's the funny thing, is that in this community now, when I talk about this Prince George group in this community in Hamilton, is that it's flipped over. Like, it's flipped right over. Now, everybody who's new coming in, they go into the steps right away. They have sponsorship and are sponsoring people within, weeks, couple months, having had this 12-step experience. And some of the older guys will go, "That's blasphemy." It's like, no, it's our big book. And these new people who are coming, they don't know there's no other way. They don't know that there's a way where you don't actually have to do anything, where the most of the information at most meetings will be driven towards stopping you from doing anything. You shouldn't do that for a year. You shouldn't sponsor people till you're 5 years sober. You shouldn't, and you don't need to make those amends. And most of the conversations is driven towards what not to do. And so they've got these young people with like 3 months of sobriety, and they're sponsoring new guys. They're going down to the detox and putting on meetings and stuff. And people are going, "That is so wrong. They're sick. They can't help other sick people." Thank God that we didn't rely on that when Alcoholics Anonymous was formed. Thank God our co-founders were so well
right.
When AA was founded. God, we always been the half blind leading the blind. I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
Okay, so you're going to have people listening to this, Marty. That and some, you know, I can always tell you that when something comes up in a meeting that I'm attending, and it is slightly kind of on the edge, sometimes I used to not like it, but now what I have found out that for me is that it helps me to crystallize what I actually believe. Right? It kind of it puts that stake in the ground. So here, the reason I'm saying that is because I've got a feeling there are going to be people listening to this that are a little divided on this, and I'm okay with that. I'm good
Yep.
with that. And so, what I'm asking, if you would please share your experience, strength, and hope for the ones who are sitting there and they're saying to themselves, you know what? I've experienced what Marty's experienced. I want to have a 12-step experience. I want to work the steps. I want to make sure that I've done everything in my power to have a 12-step experience. So why don't you talk to that group of people right now, or just share your experience, strength, and hope around that?
Okay. Okay. So alcoholism demands treatment. There's no doubt about it. And I believe that if an individual hasn't engaged or taken the 12 steps, driven toward a spiritual life, that their alcoholism will demand treatment like this. It will demand treatment like working too hard, monetary sort of acquisition, materialism, pornography, and all kinds of self-indulgent behaviors like gambling or these kinds of things. And it just manifests, untreated alcoholism manifests in those self-centered ways. And so over time, God damn it, I didn't take a drink today. That's a good day. At least I didn't drink today. That stuff is deadly, because we don't meet people who suicide when they're drunk except by accident. Drinking saved me from dying from alcoholism. It's like when the people that check out here, the people that just can't do it one more goddamn day are untreated alcoholics. Untreated. So this 12 steps to forge you some treatment. So the way Mark qualified me and put me into the second and third steps in those first few minutes is exactly what it says in the big book. And that's how long it takes, is a few minutes. But it required an amount of humility. It required this ability for me to say, okay, I'm going to come with you and follow him. And why I did that is not like me. It is not like me. So I feel that it was profound. I feel that it was divine. I feel that something was directed to happen. So but once you sit down with another man and to do a third step together, nothing is more binding, I think, than maybe with the exception of hearing a person's fifth step, or fourth step. I think that's what happens, right? So if you're around here for 5 and 8 and 10 and 12 years and you've never had a 12-step experience, this takes a couple of days. But what you need to do is you need to have a sponsor that either is carrying that message or is open to the fact that you'd like to do that. And you would go to them and you'd say, I'd like to have that experience. I'd like to do that. And there are many people. That Wednesday night PPG group that Charlie and Chad and Ashley and those guys run, they offer that up right there. So you can keep your sponsor, but if you want to have a 12-step experience, we'll take you through the steps here virtually if you like. And that is not only a distinct possibility, it's an absolute recommendation. Once you engage in this process of steps 4 through 9, you will not turn back. When you do an inventory for real on resentment, fear, and sex conduct, and you share that with another human being, you're going to go immediately and start knocking on doors and looking people in the eyes. And you're going to think right now, well, I don't need to make amends to anybody. Everything's pretty peaceful in my life. But when you make a list of all the persons you had harmed, I'd like to see you say the same thing. I'd like to see you say the same thing and have the same response when you make a list of all the persons you had harmed. Once you make that list, you become committed to the prospect of cleaning it up. Only the desperate will do that. And people who are 12 years sober, 14 years sober on a middle of the road sobriety are not desperate anymore. When I ask somebody, look, are you willing to do this? When they're brand new, yeah, whatever. Once they get a couple of nights sleep and a few cheeseburgers, man, it's awful hard to convince them to do anything. You know what I mean? It's tough. And that's why in the 9th step, we remind people, remember at the beginning, you were willing to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. We remind them that in the 9th step. And for anybody who is listening to this podcast, if I was to say that when I talked about the transition around my sexual abuse and stuff, it was steps 4 through 9. It had nothing to do with just step 4, me looking at it again. I'd looked at it many times through therapy and all that. I'm looking at it again. When I put in the last column all the things that I had done in my life relative to that and to, just the things that I had done to people, I began to lose my victimization. I began to lose my perspective that somehow this world has been damaging to me. I started to see that I had been damaging to it. And when I made a list of those damages and started going out and knocking on doors and looking people in the eyes, that's when the whole sexual abuse stuff started to slide away and slip away. And then God started presenting people in my life on both sides of that fence, abusers and the abused. And I was asked to deal with that. When the 10th step says love and tolerance is our code. I don't know how much time we got, John.
You're fine.
Okay, I just want to say something, and I'll try to. Sandy Beach became my friend. My sponsee Kevin and I drove down a few years ago and had a wonderful conversation with Sandy about some stuff, and I got so much out of my friendship with him in the short time that it existed. But one of the things that Sandy used to always say was about the 10th step. He always talked about the 10th step, entering the world of the spirit. Now, this 10th step thing, I'm going to practicalize it for people, because I told you when I was looking at the steps how weird the 10th step sounded. It just sounded weird to me, and it didn't make any sense. But I believe that all the secrets to good living are in the 10th step, all of them. And what that means is that there's nothing wrong, ever. There's never anything. There's no problems anymore. We enter the world of the spirit, and it says, when these crop up, what? Resentment, fear, dishonesty. When these crop up, what do? We have this program now that tells us that it says, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask God at once to remove it. That's what I'm going to do. I learned to do that in steps 6 and 7. And then it says, you're going to identify it's what you learned how to do in 4. And then it says, we're going to tell somebody about it, which is step 5. And then it says, we're going to make amends if we harmed anybody in the process, which is steps 8 and 9. And then it says, we're resolutely going to turn our attention to someone who can help, which is step 12. So in the moment, when these things crop up, we're immediately going to do this. And that's steps 4 through 9. And then step 12. And that's how our lives live in the moment, right now, the power of now. All the secrets to life are right here, right now. It's like the Vedas in Hinduism. It's like all these secrets about spiritual living and Alcoholics Anonymous come from this sort of old, archaic way of being centered and being peaceful. Now, the reason I tell you that is theoretically, that's what it is, the information we're giving you. Here's how it works practically at 34 years sober. I'm driving to my AA meeting one night, and I get a phone call that my middle daughter suicide. She committed suicide. She took a rope, she put it in the rafters, and she hung herself. And I'm driving down the road on the way to my meeting, and I slam on the brakes. I pull the car over, and I can't believe it. And I start smashing on the dash. I start smashing the mirror. I grab my steering wheel. I bend the steering wheel. And then all of a sudden, all that stuff came to me about when these crop up. What do? I ask God at once to remove it. And I did that, and with tears and anger all over me. And I knew that my friend Brian, who I did my workshops with, is just down the street. And I drove the car down the street, and I saw Brian. I fell into his arms. I told him what happened. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, let's do the meeting. And so all the guys are here, a couple of drunk guys there that night. It was actually a pretty good meeting. But we sat in the meeting and sat on my hands and just tried to attend to others. Very difficult, but I tried to attend to others as best I could. And when the meeting ended, he said, let's go. And we went down to the hospital. Now, my daughter hadn't died. She was on life support system and all wired up. I went and I saw my wife, and she was crying, and I held her and I whispered into her ear, it's going to be okay. And it's because I knew it was. And I went to the doctors and the nurses, and I thanked them for looking after my daughter. And then I said, can I go in and see her? And they said, yeah. And I went in, I put my hand underneath Sarah's head, and I kissed her on the forehead, and I whispered into her ear, it's going to be okay. And it's because I knew it was. And we're talking about an hour and a half of a circumstance and a situation that was devastating, debilitating, painful, absolute, insane, out of control sensations in my body. Gone. Hour and a half. Why is that important? Because a couple of years ago, just after COVID started, my oldest daughter rolled in an ATV and she banged her head in her roll bars, and they sent her to the hospital. I actually saw her. She looked like she was concussed. I said, go to the hospital and have it looked at. And when they looked in, they found something in her head, and it was a tumor the size of a plum. And while I was sitting here at my desk, at the very desk I'm sitting here right now at, I have a room full of people here on weekdays, and I'm sitting at this desk, and I get the phone call that this is what's happened. My daughter's found it out, and her husband are in the truck coming towards me because she needs me. And she tells me the news, and I lose it. Spiritually, mentally, I lose it sitting here. Nobody can see it happening. But inside of me, it's like, what the After all I do, this is all this bargaining. And I get up and I walk into the room right adjacent. I drop to my knees and I ask God at once to remove it. I said, yeah, I'm not going to be of any use to her if she doesn't come. I came out and I told my colleague, which is 3 feet from the door, exactly what the news was I just got. And I said, I'll be right back. And by the time I went down the stairs to meet her coming in the backyard, which is 8 minutes later, coming into the back of my office, she fell into my arms and I was able to hold her very close and whisper in her ear, it's going to be okay. Because I knew it was. So that's an hour and a half to 8 minutes. And this is how it works in a practical way. That is gone. This all that did was open up a door, brain cancer, and we just found out 3 days ago that she's got lung cancer too. Like, it's not good. But I'm good, and she's good, and it's all good. And the thing is, we go through these things, and the 10th step gives me that venue to experience and engage, and it doesn't make me numb. Do I seem numb? Do I seem numb in any way? I react. I cry at Alpo commercials. You know what I mean? I cry when the little boy's throwing the frisbee to the dog. And then when last night, did you see that fight? Oh my God, I was jumping up and down, Tyson Fury, and it was incredible. What a fight. And I'm passionate about everything I do. I mean, I can do a crossword and get bent out of shape. So it's the 10th step keeps me ever present in the moment. And that's what helps me live. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm reminded right after I'm learned in that experience that we only have one code in AA. It ain't don't drink, go to meetings, or 90 meetings in 90 days. It isn't any of that stuff. It isn't about reading the big book and studying the big book. It is not about any of that. So we got one code that we have to live by. Love and tolerance. And everybody focuses on the tolerance. They always say, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm pretty tolerant of others. They forget that you got to recognize that other people are pretty tolerant of you. I got to recognize other people are really tolerant of me. It's the code I have to live by to love people who are tolerating me. I'm a hard thing to handle sometimes. And, it's the love. It's the only part of our code. I mean, I don't think we talk about it enough. I really don't. You want to empty out an AA meeting, talk about two things, love or God. And this is love and tolerance is our code. It's our code. Anyway, I wanted to share that 10th step experience because you asked about people who are stoic in their sobriety, people who are just not feeling it. You know what I mean? They're sober a long time. They're not drinking a long time. When you look at Chuck Chamberlain's A New Pair of Glasses, you tell me, do you feel that way about your life? And if you don't, you're missing the trip. It's not like you got hand selected to have a shitty life, even in spite of not drinking. Like, this is amazing. It's an amazing life. Amazing life. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I'm a hard thing to handle sometimes. I never really thought about that.
People got to tolerate me, not the other way around.
Yeah, right. We always think about the others tolerating them.
Oh, I'm so tolerant.
I am a walk in the park, but you, on the other hand.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thanks, Marty. All right, so I'm going to close it up here with page 164 from the big book. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us, like me and Marty C., as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, my friend Marty, I really have enjoyed meeting you. And thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share. God bless.
Thank you very much, buddy. Appreciate it.
Marty C., just most excellent. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me and sharing your thoughts and your story and your perspective and with the Sober Speak audience. I so much appreciate it, and I'll look forward to having you on again in the near future. If you heard that today and that impacted you in some form or fashion, please pause your device and share it with a friend or family member. Remember, that may be just what they need today. Once again, thank you so much, Marty C. Now, on to a little bit of a listener feedback. Jude writes in, and Jude says, "Hi, John. I'm grateful to have discovered your podcast. I've been trying to get sober and stay sober for the last 9 months with some good stretches, but I still haven't gotten it to stick. I've been trying to work with my sponsor and do the steps. I've been going to meetings, but then I'll trail off. I'm writing because something that one of your recent guests said, Doug R., really stuck with me. He commented on recognizing that he was talented and intelligent, and yet that was not enough. I feel like I'm in the same situation. I have advanced degrees and I know I'm pretty smart, and yet I haven't been able to stay sober. That asking for help from a higher power has been hard, and I've not been doing it well. I know that's where I need to be focusing. Thanks to Doug and for sharing his story. Best, Jude." Well, Jude, there are many folks out there just like that, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to put that particular letter or email at the top of this episode. And because there are many folks, and I've tried to do it myself, trying to outsmart God, trying to outsmart the program, and thinking that our human reasoning could carry us far enough. But in my experience, that does not work out too well. But thank you so much, Jude, for being vulnerable and writing in. Chris writes in, and Chris says, "I live in the small town of Maysville, Kentucky. I'm 35 years old, and recently, on January 7th, 2022, I needed help with alcoholism. I am currently at a rehab facility in Jackson, Mississippi called Defining Wellness. This is my first time ever getting help with my alcohol abuse. Your podcast was recommended to me by Brian," he says his last name, "Brian P., who resides in Texas and is also in recovery." Well, I don't know if Brian told you this, Chris, but Brian's been on the podcast many times over. Anyway, he says, "I recently read a book called No More Vodka in My Orange Juice. This was a really good read, and I was able to relate to it. Thanks. Regards, Chris H." And then he gives his phone number. Well, Chris H., God bless you. It sounds like you're on the right track. I'm glad Brian recommended the podcast to you, and keep us posted. Michael J. writes in, and this is not Michael J. Fox. So it's Michael, and then his last initial is J. Nonetheless, he says, "Hey, John, I love the podcast. Found it about 2 months into my second try in Alcoholics Anonymous. It has really helped me tremendously. I started listening with Mumbai Mike, and over time realized that there were just so many to get caught up on, and I've listened to all of them now." For those of you who don't know, Mumbai Mike he's talking about was the first episode that I ever did. And that's episode number 1. And he went back and he found that. And I guess all the rest of them. You have listened to quite a few episodes, Mr. Michael J. That's great. Thank you very much. And anyway, I'm flashing back now to Mumbai Mike. And I've talked about this a little bit on the program before, but I went to a meeting one day and I knew I was thinking about starting this podcast, and I had like a microphone set up and I didn't really know what I was doing. And this guy named Mike was visiting from India, which is where he lived. And we ended up titling the episode Mumbai Mike. And I got him over there, recorded him, and he gave me something to kind of figure out what to do it with. So I'm like, okay, I have this recording. Now, what do I do with it? How do I get it out there to people? And so I'm very grateful for Mum by Mike. Anyway, back to Michael J. Michael J says, I love listening over. I really want to get in touch with the kitchen table AA guys. All three of them have really opened up my program, and again, over the last 5 months. My last drink date is July 13th, 2021, and discovering this podcast was obviously a gift from my higher power because I seem to be listening to the perfect speakers at the perfect times of struggle. I've plugged the show at my home group I attend. It's called the Fog Lifters of St. John's, Michigan. And in other towns nearby, and the Al-Anon clubs of Lansing. I love the title of that meeting, the Fog Lifters in St. John's, Michigan. If you're out there and you're one of the Fog Lifters, tell Michael J. I said hello. But nonetheless, he says, I have a wonderful sponsor who himself has a wonderful sponsor. I used to love to listen to talk radio, Howard Stern and etc. So this actually fit right into normal life for me. I find each episode intriguing and feel so much love from the program of recovery from all of you. It is truly a blessing, and what you are doing is truly remarkable. Not to cut out any of the other podcasts, but for this alcoholic, this one, Sober Speak, is the one that fits me the most. I listened through Spotify and I found that there is actually a Big Book podcast by Howard, and it's an Audible version. A Big Book podcast by Howard. Is he talking about Howard Stern? I don't think so. But anyway, that's very interesting. Anyway, I says, I like to listen to stories in that, and I use it to read along at home, like a mini Big Book study, laugh out loud. This has been very helpful to me in understanding better the writings, and I thought it might be useful to the listeners. May we all be blessed in our paths. However, they may be laid out, and may God guide us to all the happy destiny we are deserving as His children. Thank you for what you do, John M., in all aspects. Being able to listen right when I need to has been the remedy for situations that I may be baffled by, and for some reason that happens to be right when I need it. Is it odd or is it God? I don't think I've heard that one before. I thought I'd heard them all. Nonetheless, and he says, God bless you all, Michael J. Is it odd or is it God? Thank you, Michael J. Thanks for writing in. That's very kind. Janice writes in, and Janice says, hi, John. I'm so glad I found your podcast. I love having a meeting between meetings. I was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina, where I now live with my husband and 2 children, 5 and 7. I realized I had a drinking problem in 2007 after watching my aunt nearly die in the ICU from a year of alcoholic drinking. I first came to AA in 2018, scared and shaking, couldn't really take it in. So scared, a high school friend of mine set me up with a woman who happened to be a nurse. We met a little before the meeting, and she walked in with me. My first meeting was not a good one, so I didn't think AA was for me. I kept in touch with the nurse for a couple of weeks, but eventually ended up going inpatient for suicidal thoughts. Taking away alcohol, my coping mechanisms revealed some major depression. After a brief 3-day stay at a psych ward, when a 30-day treatment center, then a 30-day treatment center for mental illness, I came home, but suicidal again, and went to another psych ward for 10 days. Being away from my kids for 45 days was excruciating. AA meetings were brought to the hospital, and I went every night and that they were offered. I started to relate to the people who shared. I continued to go to AA meetings almost daily post-hospitalization, but didn't realize that that wasn't enough. I needed a sponsor and found one. We attempted working the steps, but my whole head and heart weren't in it. I was able to stay sober for over 500 days by joining a Sober Mom Facebook group, but without working a spiritual program, I relapsed. Then I continued to relapse many, many, many times over. I couldn't stay sober for a little while, and then the fact that I didn't have emotional sobriety would bring me back to the bottle. As of January 3rd, 2022, I decided to take my life. I'd been living in a hell I created in my mind, and I couldn't take the pain anymore. I took a few months worth of 2 of my prescriptions, and I thought that would certainly take my life. My husband found me not breathing well and called 911. I was taken to the ER and then an ICU. I woke up in the ICU not sure if I was dreaming. After a couple of days, I came to and a nurse knocked on the glass doors of my room and waved at me. She said, "Hi," and I was looking better. Where had I seen this woman before? Then I remembered her holding my hand in the ER. I knew her, but wasn't sure from where. Then it dawned on me. She was the nurse who took me to my first AA meeting. Wow. God was telling me to go back into AA. I eventually got my cell phone and I was able to attend AA meetings via Zoom while in ICU for 8 days. I was transferred to a local psych ward for 4 days and then came home. I have attended a meeting every day since, sometimes more than once a day. I found a sponsor via the Zoom meetings. I call her daily and we meet twice a week and read the big book in 12 and 12. I'm about to start on the 4th step. I pray every morning and night. At first, I didn't know what I was doing, but I'm starting to learn. AA is saving my life. If I drink again, I die. I know this for certain. My 2 children need me, and I need to get well for myself so I can be the best mom possible for them. My aunt now has 5 years sobriety through AA, and she is a great person for me to talk to. I have seen the program change her into a beautiful, peaceful person for me to talk to. I have seen the program change, for me, a beautiful, peaceful person, and it gives me so much hope. I'm making sober friends. I haven't had friends in a long time. I thank God every day for AA and the people in the program. Thank you for your service and your podcast, Janice. Wow, Janice. Thanks for writing in. That is, it took my breath away for a second. Gosh, I don't know what to say. I'm so glad that your attempt to take your life was unsuccessful for both you, your family, your children, your husband, and for all those near you. It sounds like you're on a great path, and I'm so glad to hear that. Please keep me posted, Janice. God bless you. Paul writes in and he says, "Hey, John, I'm in British Columbia, Canada. My sobriety date is October 18th, 1989, 32 plus years. I originally became aware of SoberSpeak on a Facebook group I started calling, and it's called Sober Seniors of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm assuming somebody can search that up there, Paul, if they're in Facebook and come find you. So if you're interested in Sober Seniors of Alcoholics Anonymous, I hadn't tried to find it in Facebook, but I'm just assuming that it's there. Anyway, he says, since then, I've had the opportunity to listen to a number of recordings, and enjoy the shares. I enjoy working with newcomers. When I share, it's usually about not giving up, as it took me a number of times in and out of AA before I finally did steps 1, 2, and 3. We are very similar, Mr. Paul. Anyway, he says, thank you for your service. And if you want, please keep in touch. Take care, Paul. Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate you. And we've been sober about the same amount of time. I got sober in 1989 after going in and out myself, my friend. I completely get it. Mary writes in, last but not least, and Mary says, hi, John, my name is Mary M., and my partner Andy B. and I live in Newport, Rhode Island. I found out about your podcast on the secret Facebook group from my partner, who is an avid fan of your podcast. He works on a car carrier ship and listens every week because he can't make it to meetings while he is away. I am looking for more recovery support online to supplement my AA meetings and found your group. I have 7.5 years sober and my partner has 17. I honestly haven't listened to too many of your podcasts, but the ones I have to, I've enjoyed very much. I look forward to listening to more in the future. Mary M. Well, Mary M., God bless you. God bless Andy B. If anyone's out there in Newport, Rhode Island, and you know Andy B. and Mary M., give them my best. All right, everybody. That is another week in the books. I take this 1 week at a time. Hope to be back next week. May God bless you and keep you until then. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. Love you guys.